Tonight we're going to study the story of the sacrifice of Isaac, partly for its intrinsic interest and partly because it is read on Rosh Hashanah, and I'll be speaking, B'ez Hashem, Wednesday night about Rosh Hashanah, so that this will be part of the background. This is chapter 22 in the book of Genesis, and I'm going to go through it piece by piece, so having the text in front of you will be an advantage. And as always, when we look at a text like this, there's a great deal of material that I'm skipping because it's not relevant to the particular points that I'm interested in discussing. But the Chumash is endlessly deep, and I should understand if I skip something, it's not because there isn't a great deal there to know and to understand, just because it's not my particular focus. Now, everybody wants to know, how can God command murder? Especially of an innocent and indeed, in certain respects, ideal human being. So we will talk about that. It is an important question. But there are other questions also based on the text. And here I'm following Rav Dessler, who follows the main commentators as well. I would heartily recommend that you read his essay on this parsha. So we'll read through it quickly, and I'll point out the items that I think are necessary to try to understand, and then we'll try to discuss the meaning of the story as a whole. It happened after these things that God, that's because a particular name of God is being used here, Elohim, tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he replied, here I am. And he, God, said, please take your son, your only one whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Bring him up there as an offering upon one of the mountains which I shall tell you. So it will be relevant that God says, please. Now, for the aficionados, the word in Hebrew is no. No means now. But there are several words in Hebrew that mean now. And this is a polite form of now. That's why Chazal have told us that no means please. And the obvious redundancy. And if you're going to use his name Isaac anyway, why put in all the descriptions? What do you need them for? So Abraham woke up early in the morning. He saddled his donkey, took his two young men with him, and Isaac his son. That's very awkward. I don't know if we'll get to it. He split the wood for the offering and stood up and went to the place which God had spoken to him. On the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and perceived the place from afar. Abraham said to his young men, stay here by your sons with the donkey, while I and the lad will go yonder. We will worship and we will return to you. So immediately the reader says, hey, wait a minute. The deal was you were supposed to sacrifice Isaac. And the commentaries say that there are times when people say something without thinking and don't appreciate themselves the significance of what they say. So either he said it because he didn't want to say something peculiar to them, or it was like a slip of the tongue. But there's no question that he intended to kill his son, as we will see. Now, by the way, it starts off by saying that God tested Abraham. So, Odessa points out, the first sentence is supposed to be the topic sentence, giving you a summary of the scenario, of the story that you're supposed to read. I think it's just a little cherry. Isn't Isaac being tested? All he has to do is die, that's all. I think if I had written it, I would have written God tested Abraham and Isaac. So the fact that Isaac is mentioned needs to be explained. Okay. Abraham took the wood for the offering and placed it on Isaac his son, took his hand, the fire, and the knife, and the two of them went together. Let's keep track. How many items are we taking up the hill? 3. The wood, the fire, and the knife. Keep that in mind. Now, it says, the two of them went together. Oh, really? What would you have expected? You take the high road and I'll take the low road. I mean, and when they set out from Beersheba and go for 3 days, or 2.5 days, doesn't say they went together, all 4. Now the 2 are going up the mountain, and it says together. Then Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and he said, Father, and he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Here are the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the offering? How many are going up now? How many things are they taking with them now? Pay attention. Here are the fire and the wood. How many are going up? 2, fire and wood. What's missing?
Knife.
Why is the knife missing? Hey, what happened to it? Left it behind? No, he hid it. Here are in Hebrew means something that's visible. Keep that in mind. Now he says, where is the lamb or young animal in Hebrew for the offering? Why do you think he's asking now?
He's curious.
Because they went on a 2.5 day trek to get there. You don't take an animal from home and walk it for 2.5 days. That's just inconvenient. You wait till you get to the place where the sacrifice is going to be, and then you pick up an animal. Okay, you're going through the backwoods, the marketplaces, and so on and so on. But now you've reached the mountain, and there's nobody else on the mountain. So there's nobody there to sell you an animal. So now he says, where's the animal? Up until now, it was clear to him they were going to pick up an animal on the way. They've done this before. This is a standard procedure. But now, it's not following according to plan. And Abraham said, God will seek out for himself the lamb for the offering, my son. A lot of words. And the 2 went together. Now let's see, this is the end of verse 8. The end of verse 6 says the 2 of them went together. Isn't that a little redundant? Twice? Obviously, there must be something that happened which would have led you to think that they didn't go up together. They wouldn't go up together. And the text is saying, no, don't make that mistake. They're going up together. So I have to figure out what that is. They arrived at the place which Hashem had spoken to him. Abraham built the altar there, enraged the wood, bound Isaac, his son, placed him on the altar, popped the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. People misunderstand the beginning of the passage. They misunderstand the basis of Rashi. It wasn't really so. He knew it wasn't going to happen. He knew it would be restored, so on and so on. No siree. The verse here says, he took it to slaughter his son. And an angel of Hashem, that means the name here is different. It isn't the name we're using all the way through. God stands for the name Elohim. Hashem stands for the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Called him from heaven and said, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Do not stretch out your hand against the lad, nor do anything to him. For now I know that you are a God-fearing man, since you have not withheld your son, your only one, from me. There are 2 things to say here. I was brought up Reform. And Reform, they taught us that the point of the story is to teach you that human sacrifice is abhorrent, abominable, primitive, savage, and unthinkable from a Jewish point of view. And the point of the whole story is to tell you that it was called off. Well, let's see. Let's read verse 12 again. Do not stretch out your hand against the lad, nor do anything to him, for now I know you are a God-fearing man. How do I know that? God is speaking. How do I know you're a God-fearing man? I'll tell you how. Because you have not withheld your son. You didn't hold him back. You didn't refuse to give him to me. When I told you to kill him, you were ready to kill him. That's why you passed the test. Because I told you to kill him, and you're ready to kill him. Does that sound like sending the message that human sacrifice is unthinkable, impossible to entertain? Sounds to me like it's very opposite. You say, of course it's possible. Somehow it's perfectly all right, perfectly legitimate, perfectly appropriate. Yes, he told him not to do it. Well, okay, we'll have to explain why he told him not to do it. But he knows he's a God-fearing man because he was ready to do it. That's what it meant to pass the test. The idea that the point of the story is to teach you that human sacrifice is abominable, it just isn't in the words. Not that that matters to everybody, but okay, it isn't in the words. Furthermore, Why is the crowning achievement here that he's a God-fearing man? I could think of a dozen ways to describe the success. You're self-sacrificing, you're obedient, you're grateful, you love God, and Abraham is described as loving God. Zera Avram Ohavi, the descendant of Abraham, the one who loves me. Why is it specifically fear? And of course, in the Hebrew, it's yira, which is also awe. Not pachad, which is fear of punishment. It's also awe. Why would that be the description of the success? Abraham raised his eyes and saw, behold, a ram afterwards caught in the thicket by his horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up there as an offering instead of his son. Abraham gave the name to a site. 15, the angel of Hashem called to Abraham a second time from heaven. He said, by myself I swear the word of Hashem that because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only one, you didn't hold him back. You were ready to kill him. That I should surely bless you and greatly increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens, like the sand on the seashore. Offspring shall inherit the gate of his enemy. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring, because you have listened to my voice. Abraham returned to his young men, and they stood up and went together to Beersheba. Together. That's the third time together. And Abraham stayed at Beersheba. Of course, 19, you want to know? Where's Isaac? It says Abraham returned. What happened to Isaac? Not mentioned. Wonder where he is. Okay, now, these are questions that have to be answered. Now, Rav Dessler takes us through the story from two different points of view. Abraham and Isaac are real people who had lived real lives. They have real families, and they've contributed to the events of history. But they also embodied philosophical principles. Here, you often find in studies of literature, the question is raised, is this a genuine historical event, or is this story meant to teach some kind of moral lesson? And from the either or, what you hear is that real events in the world don't teach moral lessons. They're haphazard, they're uncontrolled, undirected, undesigned. So either the story is fiction, written by an author who wants to teach you something, or no, it's real history, in which case it's important to study history, but not going to teach you anything. Now, our point of view, of course, is not that at all. History is managed, directed, controlled, manipulated, and therefore, for us, the fact that it's a real historical event is consistent with its being designed to teach us something. And Rav Dessler analyzed as follows, that Abraham stands for a certain principle, and Isaac stands for a certain principle, and you have to interpret the event through the eyes of each of them in terms of the principle that he represents. That way you get at least two stories. There's a story of Isaac's experience at the mountain, and the story of Abraham's experience at the mountain. Abraham's philosophical principle is loving kindness. Isaac's philosophical principle is strict justice, strict desert. What I've earned is what I should get, not more. No handouts, nothing free. We've spoken about this before. But now, let's look at Isaac's part in the story from the point of view of his principle. His relationship to God is, I'm working to earn from you what you should give me. I don't want anything I didn't earn. Now let's ask, has anyone earned the right to life? Can anyone say to God, you owe me life? Life, on the Torah's point of view, is a free gift. It's a continuous gift. It isn't as if you were alive yesterday and nobody interfered with you, so you're alive today because Your life has its own natural inertia. It just carries on by itself. Life is a continuous gift, a continuous free gift. Of course, in pregnancy and in birth, you didn't do anything to deserve it. Nor for the first 13 years of your life did you do anything to deserve it. But even if you lived a perfect life thereon, that would only retroactively justify the gift of life when you lived it. It wouldn't give you a claim on more life. Let me give you an example. This country, when you build an apartment, so usually it's in a housing complex, and houses going up more or less simultaneously, and different houses get done. Some get done earlier, some get done later. You want to move into your apartment, you don't want to pay more rent elsewhere, but the electricity for your house, your building hasn't been set up yet. And next door, there is operating electricity, so you see these big electrical wires going from building to building. Because you move in and you say to the next door neighbor, you have electricity and I don't. Let me plug into your electrical grid, and you can offer to pay him. In the meantime, he gives you electricity so that you can move into your apartment. This happens all the time. So now, let's say the guy's good-hearted and you're just using domestic appliances. Listen, I'm not going to check the meter and check, how many watt hours you use and so on and so on. You can use it. Fine. You're there for 3 months. Your house is still not connected. 1 week he comes to you and he says, listen, next week I'm getting heavy machinery and I'm going to need all my electricity for my own needs. So next week I'm going to have to disconnect you from my grid, and I hope you'll find a substitute. Is he victimizing you, cheating you, depriving you, stealing something from you? All you have to say is thank you. You got it free for 3 months. God is giving out free life all the time. You say, when faced with the possibility of death, you can't do that because you owe me more life. No, he doesn't owe you more life. Even if you lived a perfect life, suppose I'm the one who's taking off your grid and you tell me you're going to disconnect. I say, listen, I happen to know that you are a devotee of Greenpeace. Everything I did in the 3 months that I was connected was for the sake of Greenpeace. I was publicizing their events and raising money for them. Everything I did is something that you believe in, something that you think is important and valuable. Therefore what? Therefore you owe me more electricity? Certainly not. You could say, I congratulate your good sense for living up to one of my great values and so on and so on, but I need it for my machinery that's coming in next week. I can't give you any more. No one has a right to life against God. Therefore, Isaac's ready to sacrifice himself. He's ready because he's not giving up anything that for him he has a claim on, because he understands himself as having a claim only on that which he earned, and he didn't earn a right to life. Dessler points out that means that Isaac's test is to live up to his own essence, to live up to his own key value. That doesn't mean it's trivial. To die for your values is a very significant test. But the test is to be willing to go to the end for the sake of the value that you believe in, that you live, that you embody, that you're representing in the world. And this is the answer to the deep philosophical question, how can God command murder? The short answer is, when God commands it, it's not murder. When God commands it, it's not murder. Because murder means depriving someone of his life. But vis-a-vis God, it isn't your life. It doesn't belong to you. It's a gift. God is giving the gift, and God says, that's the end of the gift I'm giving you. Otherwise, whenever a person dies, he could complain. God would be a mass murderer. Everyone who dies, except for the people who die from murder, let's leave that aside, human murder. Everyone who dies would have a moral complaint against God. How could you let me die? You owe me life. No one, God doesn't owe anyone life. Even the greatest tzaddik he doesn't owe life to. So the answer to how can God command murder is, when God commands it, it's not murder. This is specifically about murder now. Not about suffering and not about other kinds of injustice. This is murder because life is being given moment by moment as a free gift. It doesn't cover any more ground than that. Because it can be covered in other ways, but that's all I'm covering now. I'm not doing more than that. You have a question? Yeah.
So in a situation, let's say outside of this, where let's say X person kills Y person, are they like? Can we say, well, you're harming, let's say, Y person by killing them, and you're only harming God, or no, harming God's the right word, but it's only bad because you're destroying God's creation. You're not harming them directly. Would that not be?
You ask, if A kills B outside of the scope of the Torah, who's the victim? Is it just that I'm?
Yeah.
I mean, why? The life that God is giving him may very well be a great benefit to him. So if someone kills him and deprives him of that life, the person is a victim. I mean, why should he not be a victim?
So would he not be a victim in this case? Would Isaac not be a victim then?
The question is not, but if you're connected to somebody else's electric grid and you're using it and it has all sorts of benefits for you, and then it comes time and he says, I need it for my own purpose, and it disconnects you, you may suffer a loss thereby, but you have no claim against it because it's not yours. It wasn't yours in the first place. By the way, some people say, but if you've been giving it to me over time, I may build up a dependency in thinking that it's going to continue, and I may not be able to be prepared for it, and so forth and so on. So you have to understand, every morning you have a little note in your mailbox. Remember, this could end at any time. Now, in the parallel, you read the obituaries in the newspaper. People die. You'll get used to that. You'll come to expect the fact that people do die, and that there is no guarantee of a continuation of life forever. We would say that if God ends a person's life, he wasn't deprived of anything because God knows what would be good for him and has decided that this would be best for him to die at this point in time. But if one person kills another person, that doesn't follow.
I could imagine, let's say some atheist saying that your parent has the right to kill you because they gave you life. Would that not be a comparable situation?
No, not at all. That's why I said it twice. It's on record. You can listen to the tape over again, right? I said it's a continuous gift. He's giving life all the time. So that ending life means not giving more free life. Your parents aren't continuously giving you life. You said it well, you used the past tense. They gave you life. Okay, but their life is in my pocket. Right? Whereas the life that I get from God is not in my pocket. That's the difference. That's a crucial difference. That's a continuous gift from our point of view. Okay, that's how it looks from Isaac's point of view. How does it look from Abraham's point of view? Abraham's relationship to God is a relationship of love. Love requires understanding. Love requires sharing. You can't love an ex. You can't love someone whom you don't know. There are philosophies which talk as if you can, but they're either mistaken or they're taking some element that all people have, which you know that person has, and what you love in him is that element which you know he has. But you can't love something which is beyond, something which is unintelligible to you. What God did here is he created a test for Abraham that couldn't be understood. He created a test for Abraham that couldn't be understood because God promised Abraham that Isaac would be his continuation. Isaac will be your continuation. And at this point in time, Isaac has no children. So God has placed Abraham in a contradiction. On the one hand, he tells him Isaac's going to be your continuation, and on the other hand, he tells him to kill him. At this point, Abraham's mind is short-circuited. There's no way that he can have a consistent picture of what's going on. And if you are thinking, oh, that's just because our minds are so limited, and really, and if we were cleverer, you'd figure it out. Well, let me tell you what the Ran and what the Shloah both say. The Ran says, why does God say please? Because God says to Abraham, I can't command you. I can't command you. Because even if I tell you to do it, I'm on record telling you the opposite. So when you take the two of them together, you don't come out with a command. You're faced with a contradiction. So much so that he would have been justified to have not killed him. Even though God told him to kill him, he'd have been justified in not killing him. The Shloh says that also. Because either way, he's fulfilling one thing God said and violating the other thing that God said. That's why, according to the Ran, he says, please, because a command is not forthcoming here. He's laid the groundwork where a command can't be what Abraham is facing. If you ask, then why did he do it? The Shloh answers because it's greater self-transcendence. That's a subject we'll talk about another time. But at least you have it on record. There's less of you in it, more of God in it. Now there's a midrash which spells this out and which confirms what we said 2 minutes ago about Isaac. The midrash says, after it was over, Abraham said to God, you know, you told me to do this. I had a very good argument against you. I could have said to you, you told me that Isaac's going to be my continuation. Now you're telling me to kill him. It's a contradiction. I could have used that argument against you. But I didn't. Listen to this, Abraham speaking. So you too, God, when you have a good argument against my children, don't you use it either. Don't use it against them. I acted on your behalf in the face of a contradiction, so you do that for my children also. Act on their behalf in the face of the contradiction of their bad behavior. This midrash says two things, what it says and what it leaves out. What it says is that he was facing this contradiction. What it leaves out is Abraham doesn't say, you told me to commit murder. What about that? For people for whom that's the key moral insight here, and the midrash is 1,000 years after the Torah was written. Why isn't that the objection? How could you tell me to commit murder? Because the midrash understands very well what we said before, that when God commands you to kill someone, it's not murder. It's not a moral crime at all. This midrash supports this explanation. Okay, now. Sorry, do you have a question?
So, the premise that if God tells me it's A-OK to kill someone, and therefore it's morally sound, well, what's the difference between ISIS saying that God is telling them to kill these infidels, or any other terrorist who claims to have a connection with God?
Okay, this is a very important question. What's the difference then between our position and the position of the Muslim fanatics and everything else? The answer is this. The Muslim fanatics aren't stupid. They made up the right story. If Creator was giving life continuously and told them to kill these people, then they're right in killing these people. Their mistake is they made up the story. They invented it. But they didn't invent a stupid story. They didn't invent an illogical story. They invented a logical story. It's just that they made it up. It's a lie. That's the answer to them. Not that their logic is wrong. It's just that they made it up. Yeah.
So this same logic would apply for Amalek, right? Like it's moral to...
No, Amalek is a different story altogether. We've been through this. There is no commandment to eliminate Amalek. Right. There's no such commandment. You have to offer them peace. Rambam in chapter 6 of the laws of the kings and their wars for Amalek and the seven nations, you have to start by offering them peace. And the rest of it comes only later. That's a big, big piece of misinformation that people have. I think that we're commanded to commit genocide. It's not true. Just not true. Period. Not true. Okay, let's go back to work. So now, that's why it says, now I know that you're a God-fearing man in the sense of awe, because awe is a sense of something else's immense greatness, transcendence, something that I can't understand. On the contrary, awe emphasizes that I cannot understand it. I may know the direction in which it's great, but I can't understand what it is. So at that point I can say, since God is so great, there must be a reason why this should be done, though I can't imagine why. And the idea is to be able to do without the ability to imagine why. Okay, so that's why it says, and then why does it say that God tested Abraham and not Isaac? So Rav Dessler says something representing the Musar movement. He says the Torah here wants to stress the idea of acting against your basic character, not in terms of your basic character. Nothing wrong with acting in terms of your basic character. And to be tested in terms of your basic character could be a very significant test. But it's not the test that the Torah wants to highlight in this scenario. That's why it doesn't say that Abraham and Isaac were tested. Isaac was tested to be willing to give up his life for the principle that he embodies, for the principle that he represents. Abraham is being tested to go to the end for something which isn't the principle that he represents. It isn't the principle that he embodies. It's something in addition. He's got to step outside of his rubric, step outside of his normal environment to be able to accomplish this. By the way, there's absolutely no record, certainly not in the text and not in the oral tradition, as far as I know, anywhere of Abraham being promised a reward for doing this or threatened with a punishment for failing to do it. And the reason for that, I think, is very simple. No promise and no threat would be relevant to Abraham. My son? Isaac? What are you going to do? Boil me in oil? Heat up the oil! What do you do? Promise me a mountain of gold? Can you give me a galaxy of gold? No promise and no threat would have any effect in motivating Abraham to kill his son. It has to be something that transcends both of those. What transcends it is his experience of God, which led him to understand that God's greatness is beyond his understanding, beyond his conceptualization. So that he can say, by the way, the word emunah in Hebrew, which is sometimes translated as faith, I think faith is a Christian word. I don't think we should use it. I think emunah should be translated as rational trust. Trust means I have to go beyond what I know, but I can have good reason to trust. Like you trust your doctor when he prescribes a medicine. You don't know the physiology and the pharmacology and the chemistry that makes this a good medicine for you, but you trust that he has good reason. So in the case of God, there are times when I can't understand what he wants and why he wants it, but my experience of God leads me to trust that there is a good explanation, even though I don't possess it. That's what emunah is. Emunah is faithfulness to something, trustworthiness, and you trust because it's reasonable to trust. Yeah?
Why would it say God-fearing, like you brought up before, if it seems to be based on trust in God, not out of fear?
Because, first of all, there's no such phrase in English, but the word really means awe. And that's where the trust comes from. The trust comes from the fact that your experience leads you to understand that this being is infinitely greater than you can understand, and that's why he's worthy of trust. If you thought he was a peer, then you say he's drunk or he's on drugs. You wouldn't say that he's worthy of trust. So I think it's going to the root of it. This is the characteristic which leads to the trust. That's the way I understand it. So now, so we asked, why have all these descriptions? Your son, your only one whom you love, Isaac. Now, the Midrash here has a very interesting dialogue between Abraham and God. God says to him, please take your son. Abraham says, my son? I have two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Your only one. So here, the Midrash says something which took me a long time to figure out what it means. It says, well, this one is the only one to his mother, and this one's the only one to his mother. Yeah, but that wasn't the description. The description says, your only son. So how do you answer, this is the only one to his mother? That's not answering the description. But I think what he means is this. This is the only one that I have from this mother. And this is the only one that I have from this mother. So their unique mothers are something which make them unique to me. Whom you love? He said, I love both of them. Now, there is a fascinating midrash here, which gives you a certain poignancy in the story. Perhaps you know, earlier in the book, Ishmael in his youth develops some terrible characteristics and behavior, and Sarah says to Abraham, you have to expel him and his mother from the house. And Abraham doesn't want to do it, and God confirms that she's right, and he does expel him from the house. But according to the Midrash, Abraham kept tabs on him. And he sent someone to test the hospitality of the house that he's building, Ishmael. He arrived at the house when Ishmael was out and his wife was there. And the messenger asked for help. And she said, get lost. And slammed the door in his face. Okay, she didn't really slam the door in his face. It wasn't a door, it was a tent. Okay. She said no. So he came back and reported to Abraham. That's the response that he got. Abraham sent Ishmael a message. She's not worthy of you. So he divorced her. Then he remarried. Sent another messenger. This time, the wife gave him the hospitality that he required. Came home and gave the report. Abraham sent a message to Ishmael. Come home. He came home. This is the day he came home. This is the day he came home that God said to him, take your son. And Abraham says, I have two sons. Your only one, this is the only one from his mother, the one whom you love. I love both of them. Because they both came back. Because he came back. Both sons were there. It's extremely, extremely poignant. It now makes this completely literal. Completely literal. Okay, now why give all these descriptions? You're going to say the person's name, Isaac. So one answer is that when you're going to ask something severe of a person, don't just hit him over the head with it. Break it to him gently. Take him into it by easy stages, so he'll be able to adjust to it. Fine, that's certainly one explanation. In addition, when you do it, don't do it cold. Have this in mind. Have this in mind that he's your son, your only one whom you love. Do it with that meaning. Make the test poignant to yourself. About 20 years ago, in the war in Lebanon, a man who was a surgeon was in the hospital in Haifa, and a soldier was brought in with a serious wound, and he had to do surgery, and it was his own son. In medicine, you have a rule. You don't treat your own family, because you can't trust your emotions. Here, it would be very easy for Abraham to sort of go cold. Okay, I'm doing it blindfolded. I have to do it. And indeed, the commentaries say this. Why was it on the third day? God could have arranged for him to go on a trip, and then when he got there, say, listen to what I want you to do. No, he wants Abraham to have time to think about it all night long around the campfire with nothing to do but sit there and think about what's going to happen 2 days from now. So that when he does it, it's his mind is locked into it. It's positive. Now we asked about going together. So let's put, I think this is the producer Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, I was going to say what I'm saying now. They come to the mountain, they take the implements that they need for the sacrifice, they went together. Let's think about this, together. What's going on in Abraham's mind? Well, two things are going on. He's going to perform a sacrifice to God, which is a great mitzvah and something which is a matter of great joy. But the sacrifice is going to be his son. And don't make a mistake. This was hard. Don't let anybody tell you that because of the greatness of Abraham, this was just sailing through. There's an astonishing midrash. You take a look at just for a moment at page 105. When the angel speaks to him the second time in verse 15 and 16, he says, by myself I swear, notice the capital M, the angel is speaking God's words. By myself I swear the word of Hashem, because it has done this thing, I'll reward you. So the Midrash asks, Shvu Azulama, why is God swearing? Swearing that so. Why is there an oath here? Midrash says, because Abraham said to God, you want to give me a blessing? Promise me you'll never test me again. Don't test me again. And don't test Isaac either. And God swore to him that he wouldn't test him. Kovesh es rachmav, say Chazal. He conquered his mercy to do this. Don't think it was easy. It was very, very difficult. So, they're going together. In Abraham's mind, there's a double focus. The joy of sacrifice, plus it's my son. What's going on in Isaac's mind? The joy of a sacrifice. He still thinks they're going to get an animal at a local market. Now he says to Abraham, Abraham, Abba, where's the animal? And Abraham says to him, God will choose him for himself a sacrifice, my son. Sacrifice, my son? Sacrifice, my son? Sacrifice, my son? Okay, there's a tipcha there. We know the trop. Okay, but still the words are together, right? Isaac gets it. He gets it. He now knows that he's going to be the sacrifice. Is he still going with Abraham? Are they still together? The text has to tell you. Now you might think Isaac is devoid of joy and he's devastated and he's full of fear. He's going out of duty and confusion and so on and so on. No. They're going together. And now they're more together because they both have the double state of mind. The state of mind of going joyously to do a mitzvah, to do a sacrifice, and knowing that Isaac is the one who has to die. So that together here works extremely well with this understanding of what's going on. Yeah, we're together? Now, what about the together at the end? This one is really astonishing, right? Abraham, because returned to his young men, they stood up and went together to Beersheba. So, there is a verse that the commentators quote here, from the end of the book of Vayikra.
At the very end, or?
No, not quite at the very end. I'll tell you where it is. This is on page 716. Chapter 26, verse 45. No, sorry, it's not that verse we're saying. No. I'm sorry, it's the top of the page. Mem Beis. 42. Okay, now listen to this. I know it's late. I know we've covered a lot of ground. But listen to this. Put your thinking cap on and see if you can figure out what needs to be explained. And I will remember my covenant with Jacob. And even my covenant with Isaac. And even my covenant with Abraham, I will remember. And the land I will remember. Counting on your fingers and toes, let's try it again. I'll remember my covenant with Jacob, and even my covenant with Isaac, and even my covenant with Abraham I shall remember, and I shall remember the land. See something that's off balance? Something that's out of whack?
Saying covenant with Abraham and also covenant with Isaac.
Much worse than that. How many times does it say, I will remember? No. Look again.
2.
No. Look again.
3.
Oh, now you're guessing. How many numbers are left? How many times does it say, I'll remember? Read through the whole sentence carefully and count them.
It says 3.
How many? 3. It says it 3 times. How many things are being remembered? 4. What's going on? Either tell me, I'll remember A, B, C, D, or tell me, I'll remember A, I'll remember B, I'll remember C, I'll remember D. I'll remember A, B, I'll remember C, I'll remember D? Come on, that's very peculiar. What you're saying is 3 things have to be remembered, and 1 thing doesn't have to be remembered. Why is that?
Because they were together.
But what?
Because they were together.
What's together with what?
Yitzhak and Abraham. That's why it's.
Oh, here in this incident. Oh, good try. Good try. No. The Midrash says something astonishing. Now back to where we were in 105. I asked you why in 19 it says Abraham returned. It doesn't say Isaac returned. And it says, the Midrash says, the ashes of Isaac are before me continuously. Ashes. Burned up. Slaughtered, sacrificed. God says they're before me continuously. You don't remember what's sitting on your shelf. You only remember things that aren't in front of you. It means something happened up there. Not just rehearsal called off in the middle. Something happened up there. Isaac at the end of his life is blind. So is Jacob. That's another thing. Isaac never left the land of Israel, alone of the patriarchs. When Isaac needs to get married, Abraham sends his servant outside the land of Israel to find him a wife. When Jacob needs to get married, he goes on his own. Isaac is somehow, how shall I say, etherealized out of the normal context of this world. Something happened up there. He didn't come down whole. That's why it says, or he came down superior to whole in the physical sense. That's why it says here that Abraham returned. Of course Isaac returned. Isaac has a whole history afterwards. Indeed, Isaac lived to be the oldest of all the patriarchs. But it wasn't the same Isaac that went up. And he definitely came down with certain limitations. So that's the idea here. And now it says in 19, they went together. Here, I think, I'm trying to remember, I know Rabbi Yisrael Cohen Cook says this. I don't remember whether I thought of it myself beforehand or not. But there's something exquisite here. Abraham has been through one of the key spiritual experiences in the history of mankind. He's coming down to his young men, according to one midrash, slaves. He can be together with them. He can share with them. He can relate to them. He hasn't been spiritualized out of the world. In Jewish thinking, when you have a spiritual success like that, a spiritual conquest, a spiritual acquisition that doesn't separate you from the rest of the world, it gives you more ability to connect to the world and elevate others. This together here is exquisite. He can be together with them afterwards. It's like above and beyond. Anyway, these are some of the themes that you have in this particular scenario, and I hope this will stand you in good stead, but also should encourage you to study it more. It's a great deal here. I said on Wednesday night, we'll talk about Rosh Hashanah. The fact that we read this on Rosh Hashanah has a very significant part to play in the ideas of Rosh Hashanah.